calls for the invocation. Okay, I don't see our minister who has been assigned to do the invocation. Who and where? Okay. Okay. You get your microphone. You can use this microphone, please.
Good evening to all.
Good evening.
Gracious and ever-living God, we thank you that you formed us in creating us. You have provided for us every opportunity to display the gifts and talents you have bestowed upon us. We thank you that you have called forth Adam and Eve. You called forth David, Sarah, and you call forth Jesus Christ. We thank you that you have created out of many one, and you have shaped this great nation. But more particularly, Lord, we want to thank you for these Virgin Islands. As you have called Barack to be our president, so you have called Jongh to be our governor. So you have called this honorable body forth, allowing us, Lord, at this time to recognize that all good gifts have been given to us. Enable us then in this moment to be still and know that you are God and you will be exalted in the earth. So let now, Lord, your peace, let now your love, and allow your Holy Spirit then to shape, to fashion this moment. It is Isaiah who declared in a wonderful way that you will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are fixed on you. For in returning and in rest we shall be saved, and in quietness and trust shall be our strength. So we pray, God, that the words that will be delivered and those who with anticipation listen may give to you then, Lord, what is yours, so that at the end of the day, at the end of the term, at the end of this period, under this legislative body, your will may be done. So bless all that will be said and done, for we ask with thanksgiving through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Please remain standing for our national anthem and the Virgin Islands March. you may be seated. Again, I'd like to take this opportunity to formally welcome every one of you here to the legislature, the federal and local judiciary, the executive branch, cabinet members, staffers, my colleagues, their staff, and our special guests, and of course those who are viewing and listening via radio, television, or the internet. We are being streamed live, I believe, on WTJX, also the governor's website, I understand, is streaming this live, and of course our very own Legit TV. At this time, I'd like to ask our Legislative Secretary, the Honorable Jeanette Millen-Young, for the roll call.
Senator Craig Boshinger. Present. Senator Boshinger present. Senator Judy Buckley. Present. Senator Buckley present. Senator Diane T. Capehart. Present. Senator Capehart present. Senator Dr. G. Cole. Senator Cole present. Senator Kenneth L. Gittins. Present. Senator Gittins present. Senator Clifford F. Graham. Present. Senator Graham present. Senator Alicia Chucky Hansen. Senator Hansen absent. Senator Myron D. Jackson. Senator Jackson present. Senator Sean Michael Malone. Senator Malone present. Senator Terrence Positive Nelson. Senator Nelson present. Senator Nereda Rivera O'Reilly. Senator O'Reilly absent. Senator Clarence Payne III. Senator Payne present. Senator Tregenza A. Roach. Senator Roach present. Senator Samuel Sanis. Senator Sanis present. And Senator Jeanette Millen-Young present. Mr. President, you have 13 members present, 2 absent. We have a quorum and ready to proceed.
Okay, Madam Secretary, please record Senator Hansen as excused. She'll be escorting one of our dignitaries in tonight. And are there any correspondence received from any of the members of the body?
Yes, Mr. President.
Proceed.
There's one. A letter from Senator Nellie Rivera O'Reilly addressed to yourself. Dear Senate President Malone, due to a personal matter, I will be out of the territory and unable to attend the State of the Territory address. I thank you for your understanding. Regards, Nellie Rivera O'Reilly.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. So now we have what? 13 present, 1 excused, 2 excused. And it'll be 14 present when Senator Hansen comes in to begin. Okay, at this time we will have escorting the delegate to Congress into the well, the Honorable Senator Kenneth Gittins from the District of St. Croix. And welcome, Delegate Christensen. And now we will have escorted into the well by Senator Clifford Graham, our second lady, Mrs. Gregory Francis, Cheryl Francis. Welcome, Mrs. Francis. Next, we'll have being escorted by Senator Samuel Sanazor, Vice President from the District of St. Croix, the Honorable Lieutenant Governor Gregory Francis. Pardon me, everyone. I skipped the protocol issue. It's supposed to be our First Lady. I'm being escorted by Senator Sanders, correct? Yep. Senator Sanders, our Vice President. Please escort our First Lady, Mrs. Cecile DeYoung, into the yard. Welcome, Mrs. DeYoung. Welcome. And now we have been escorted into the well by our Majority Leader, the Honorable Donald G. Cole from the District of St. Thomas and John, the Honorable Gregory Francis, our Lieutenant Governor. Senate. Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. Welcome, Lieutenant Governor Francis. And now, we will have presenting the governor, being escorted by our most senior sitting senator, longest serving senator, the Honorable Alicia Chucky Hansen from the District of St. Croix, escorting the Honorable John P. DeYoung Jr., our governor. But first, we have our bugle boy. Yes. Staff Sergeant Kevin Hendricks.
Mr. President, the Governor of the United States Virgin Islands, the Honorable John P. DeYoung Jr.
the governor begins, we're going to have a musical selection by our own songstress diva, the beautiful Lorna Freeman. Please be seated. You may proceed.
Ms. Freeman, thank you very much. That is a hard act to follow. Reverend Kaby, Senate President Malone, honorable senators, Lieutenant Governor Francis, Justice Swan, Presiding Judge Dunstan, Chief Judge Lewis, other members of the judiciary, members of my cabinet and other agency heads, Mrs. Francis, my wife Cecile, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Virgin Islanders. I stand here tonight well aware that this is the last time I will deliver a State of the Territory address to those of you in this chamber and the people of the Virgin Islands. So I wish to take full advantage of this opportunity. Tonight, I will not only talk about what we've achieved, but also about what we must do in this coming year. But before I begin, it is only fit and proper that we pause in a moment of deep appreciation for those who dedicate their lives to protecting our right and our ability to be here today. We are beholden to those who serve in our National Guards, our armed forces, all those who have served, and to our police officers and all first responders. I know all in this chamber join in thanking these men and women for their service. In the last 7 years, I have stood with families in their most difficult of times as they laid to rest those young men and women who put service to their community and their country above self. And tonight, while we honor their memory, we also let know their families that we are mindful of their sacrifices. Seven years ago, I stood here for the first time, and it was a different time. It was a time of hope, as well as a time of accepting responsibility. I stood before you that January night and acknowledged the critical problems that faced us, troubling challenges of a community that where too many children are born into and grow up in poverty, the problems of crime and a crumbling infrastructure, of limited access to health care and schools that were failing our children. We recognized that jobs and business opportunities seemed to be just passing us by, and we acknowledged openly the reality of corruption and criminal conduct within the halls of government. When I stood before you then, I declared that the state of our territory was troubling. Yet even as I expressed grave concern for the state of our territory and called for all of us to make decisions that would be painful and difficult, I never lost faith. Faith in our community and faith in you, my fellow Virgin Islanders, to know what is right. And my faith has been confirmed, because that faith at every moment since that night and even through the darkest of days that followed, I have remained optimistic about our future and our ability to overcome the forces that would try to hold us back. Then, as now, I believe that we could, by stating what is the truth, through hard work and commitment, raise the bar, rise to the challenges that would seek to break us, and rise we did. From the beginning, I knew that we had to bring together all the agencies of our government and redirect them to a common purpose. The theme of one government emerged as nothing less than a determination to change the culture of government to one common purpose, the pursuit of a common future. Since that time, we have successfully managed our way through the greatest economic collapse in generations, which became known as the Great Recession. We have pulled together and made one difficult decision after another, and we have persevered. We have weathered a swift and severe contraction in our private sector activity that many would have thought unimaginable. And through the collective and determined effort of those across our entire community, we are now beginning to experience the rebuilding of our private economy. Yes, the destruction of Hurricane Hugo and Marilyn may have been more easily seen, but the damage that has been done to us recently is just as great and just as more prolonged. As trying as this has been, however, as I stand here tonight, I firmly believe that if we do
not give back the gains that we have worked so hard to achieve. If we do what we must this year, and if we succeed in the restarting of the Jovensa refinery, we are on the cusp of the long-sought economic revival. Because as we have struggled to survive, we have also been working steadily to build a foundation for our revival. We have invigorated our economic development programs. We are broadening our economic base to include knowledge-based enterprises. Our own government-constructed superhighway, our broadband infrastructure will rival any in the country. We have approved and permitted hotel and resort projects, undertaken the expansions of our piers to handle increased traffic, and we are investing in our downtown areas. And before they start school, we are even investing in early development of our children so that they can grow up to seize these opportunities that we are doing. My years as your governor has not been primarily defined by the goals or ambitions that I set out in taking office in January of 2007. No, the financial turmoil that was unleashed upon us easily and early in my first term saw to that and caused us to redefine what was possible and forced a reordering of our priorities. But serving as governor means accepting all the challenges that reality presents. One does not get to pick and choose. When I came into office, I laid out a long-term plan to achieve fiscal balance and address the chronic underfunding of the government employees' retirement system. I knew that we had to develop new revenues to fund the pension system and our chronic general fund deficit. We targeted the cover-over program because that was the single most powerful tool provided by Congress. Our plan was straightforward. We would grow the rum industry by entering into long-term partnerships with rum producers with a particular focus on the owners of rum brands. The logic was simple. We focus on if they committed to exclusive production here in the Virgin Islands for the long term, we would invest in their brands. And the return on our investment, the resulting growth in cover-over revenues, would be dedicated to the pension fund and to the deficit. Our plan succeeded. Since our plan was put into place, our cover-over revenues available for government purposes have already grown from $62 million in 2006 to $146 million this year, assuming that we get the extenders as we have in all past years. And although we may look back today with great regret that we do not have all this money available for the pension system and the general fund, we must acknowledge that but for this money, we would not have been able to survive to where we are today. Because over the first 5 years of my administration, 3 events, completely out of local control, undermined not only our plans, but also our ability to fund our government. Let me take a moment to review our history. From our first budget year 2008 to 2009, our corporate income taxes dropped by over 70%, or over $125 million annually. In one fell swoop, almost 15% of our general fund revenues disappeared. This was due to 2 factors: the collapse of the Jovensa refinery's profitability and the Federal Internal Revenue Service's now discredited actions against our EDC beneficiaries. In any normal time, a decline of tax revenues of this magnitude would have been an unmitigated disaster that would have required that we let go those in government employment equal to the loss of those revenues. But we knew that we would soon have new revenues as a result of our rum industry strategy. And so it was possible for us to avoid that devastation that would follow immediate budget cuts in excess of $125 million. We should note that this first blow to our taxes and revenues came before the world was plunged into the 2008 financial crisis. The impact on our economy and tax revenues from this second shock was not as immediate. It took well into 2009 before it affected our core revenues, and some actually lived under the illusion that the impact from the global financial crisis might just pass us by. But the eye of this storm struck us all. The combined impact of the Great Recession and their early events, all outside of local control, was catastrophic. In 1 year, our overall revenues dropped 31%. Our private sector simply died. As tourism, construction, real estate, retail sales, and other economic activity grounded to a halt. The collapse was of such a magnitude that it quickly depleted our cash. The traditional rules of government finance dictate that we should have matched this revenue decline with an immediate layoff of government employees equal to the costs. But I was not willing to do such a massive layoff of our workers, as the impact on our society would have been crippling. The legislature recognized this urgency of the situation and ultimately authorized $480 of financing secured by our future matching fund revenues, our RUM revenues, to keep our economy alive through the worst of times, 2009 to 2011. These borrowed funds alone allowed us to continue to function as an employer, as a provider of critical services, and as an underwriter of capital projects. And they not only did that, they supported the private sector activity and employment during this crisis, but they would also be part of our future recovery. The total level of deficit funding during those 3 years alone represented 21% of total general fund spending, or 36% of personnel spending. In other words, we had lost the dollars to pay 1 out of every 3 of our government workers. And that is why, rather than lay off 1/3 of our workers, not to mention stopping all spending on critical capital projects, support for our semi-autonomous entities, and support for community organizations, we borrowed. We borrowed to keep our people at work, and we borrowed to keep the rest of our economy from further decline. In acknowledging the benefits that have come from our RUM strategy, I would be remiss if I did not recognize the contributions of our delegate. The restructuring of our territory's RUM industry began with an introduction from Delegate Christensen and was accomplished with her support and that of many of you in this chamber tonight, as well as many who are not here with us this evening. And so tonight, to each and every one of you who helped make this economic opportunity for our home a reality, I say thank you. By 2011, our tax revenues began to pick up as the economy began to improve. As revenues stabilized, however, we had to come to grips with a new fact, a new unwelcome fact. For even though things were getting better, they never got close to where we were before. Our core revenues remained 20% below pre-recession levels. What this meant in the simplest of terms is that we still did not have the money to pay for 1 out of 5 of our government workers. And so we redoubled our efforts to reduce our spending. I recommended an 8% reduction in staffing across the board to bring down the size of our payroll on an ongoing and on a permanent basis. The legislature rejected that proposal and instead chose to implement an 8% across-the-board cut in compensation for 2 years. At the beginning of 2012, the third blow came as our largest single taxpayer and employer, Hovensa, announced its closing. With no notice at all, we were forced to grapple with a new revenue hit of almost $100 million to our recurring revenue base. This was not the loss of revenues from Hovensa. This we had already suffered before the Great Recession hit. Rather, this was the loss that came when 2,000 residents who worked at the refinery lost their jobs. And with this came the loss of income of all the places they shop, they ate, the loss of all economic activity that they generated. By the end of fiscal year 2012, our recurring revenues remained down by almost 1/4 from the levels of 4 years earlier. In the ensuing year, we were forced to continue to reduce the size of our workforce, because when the legislature allowed the 8% cut to expire, it did not legislate any new revenues to offset that cost. Continuing to borrow to fund current operations is no longer a viable strategy, especially in the wake of the closing of Hovensa. We must wean ourselves off of bond proceeds as a source for our budget purposes. We must acknowledge the structural changes in our economy. The simple reality is that our economy today is not as big as it once was. Overall, our gross territorial product declined 13% from 2008 to 2012. In real terms, that is to say, after taking inflation into account, the damage to our economy from all the factors that I discussed earlier has been greater still, as our economy today is 22% smaller in real terms than prior to the 2008 collapse. Today, our economy is the smallest it has been in over a decade. And these are the facts. We have not yet achieved a balance in what we spend and what we take in. And just as we all must at home, we can only spend the money that we have. Our credit card is maxed out. In government, this means reducing personnel costs, which are by far our largest expense. And we have already taken steps in that direction. At the end of fiscal year 2013, the number of executive branch positions funded from the general fund is down to 5,167, a decline of 1,579 positions, or 23% of our workforce. And although there are some for whom facts never seem to matter when seeking to fan political flames or melee, it is worth emphasizing that the number of unclassified positions, political positions, has been reduced by 18%, while classified positions have only declined by 5%. Even as we worked diligently to reduce our spending, we have never taken our focus off of our long-term goals. Economic development has remained a top priority because I knew that we needed to work towards that day when the economy would turn and we would recover. Tourism is and always has been, and likely always will be, our largest industry and critical to our well-being. And no one should ever lose sight of the fact of that essential truth. And our work in this area has been a great success. An important first fact that we recognize is that travel agents, airline representatives, cruise officials, tour guides, they should not come to us, but that we should go to them. We wanted to meet them in their place of business to ensure that they came to ours. Therefore, we gradually closed all our physical offices, transitioned to a sales force, saved on rent, and then went out to meet and greet. Our tourism department has worked tirelessly with the airlines to stabilize airlift, to increase the number of carriers serving the territory, even during the period of industry consolidation, and in particular, to manage our way through the disruptive changes at American Eagle, and the relocation of the headquarters of Seabourn Airlines. These changes highlight the need for us to always keep our focus on what matters, and that is maintaining and growing our air service to and between our islands. Our efforts in cruise and airlift alone have borne fruit. Over the past 2 years, we have seen the highest levels of air and cruise traffic to our islands in more than a decade. And we have worked to set the goal that St. Croix has grown from 2 ship calls in 2008 to rising levels of today. And in one more confirmation that St. Croix is back as a cruise destination, this year the island will host the Premium Members Conference of the Florida Caribbean Cruise Association. And we have ramped up our efforts to build on our historical ties with Denmark to establish new linkages into the European tourism market that will yield greater numbers in the years ahead, and as we lay the groundwork for our centennial celebration 3 years from now. We have laid the foundation for new growth. All hotel development projects in St. Croix have been locally permitted and now only await federal agency approvals and improvement in the lending environment in the hospitality industry. We have done all that we can locally to clear the path for these projects, including the passage of the Hotel Development Act to bring critical inducements to support new projects. These projects may still face other challenges, but we have done all that we can locally, and we will continue to do all we can to assist and promote those who wish to work with us to build our economy. Additionally, we are participating in a federal program that allows foreign nationals to obtain visas if they invest in job-creating projects here. On St. Thomas, Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville is moving ahead on the site of the old Renaissance Hotel. And on St. John, the Westin and Kinnear Bay have major renovations underway to their premium properties. Additionally, on Water Island, and through the efforts of the Department of Property and Procurement, we are currently evaluating expressions of interest to build a boutique resort on the site of the former Seacliff Hotel. In other project areas, we have initiated a feasibility study for the theme park on St. Croix, and I have submitted legislation for funding a similar study on St. Thomas. The revitalization of Main Street in Charlotte Amalie is in process, and we will soon bid the work associated with the Phase 1 redesign of Veterans Drive. Work has begun this month on Smith Bay Park, and that will add parking and new public accommodations. And we've put our support behind the marina development project on the island of St. John. And having completed the boardwalk in Christiansted, we are now moving to completion of the town plan. I've submitted legislation to provide for the remainder of the funding needed for the demolition of Disha Bay housing, and I've also requested funding for the dredging of the Schooner Bay Channel, which will bring small cruise ships into Christiansted. We have also laid the groundwork for the long term of the new economy. Streamlined business regulation to be more supportive of new business formation. We have eliminated some upfront requirements for new businesses at the Bureau of Internal Revenue. An interested bidder can now access government proposals online through the Department of Property and Procurement. The Office of the Lieutenant Governor is engaging a contractor to fully automate the division of corporations and trademarks. The Department of Labor has instituted its Virgin Islands electronic workforce system that provides online workforce development services and a database that helps employers find workers and workers find jobs. This past August, we launched the Virgin Islands Virtual Information System, VIVIS. VIVIS is a collaborative effort that aggregates essential information from the Departments of Finance, Education, Labor, Health, Human Services, and the university to assist our residents in developing education plans that will assist them with their career choices. And as we look forward to the future, we do so knowing that the investments we've made in the world of fiber optic high-speed internet will pay dividends in years to come. I'm speaking, of course, of Virgin Islands Next Generation Network, which we have come to be known as VINGN. When we began the VINGN project, the Virgin Islands was ranked last in the nation in speed and availability of truly high-speed broadband, with most of the community unserved or underserved by high-speed internet. With the combination of federal grants we were awarded and local funding approved by the legislature, we have been able to implement the Virgin Islands fiber optic network, which will connect all the Virgin Islands. And when completed, we will have as fine a high-speed internet infrastructure as is found anywhere in the country. Virgin Islands businesses and residents using the VINGN fiber network will ultimately be able to obtain service at speeds of up to 1,000 times faster than previously available. The VI fiber optic network ring connects more than 300 community anchor institutions, which include public and private schools, the university, police and fire stations, VITEMA and other agencies, hospitals and clinics, public libraries, the courts, and the legislature. Currently, over 100 of the anchor institutions have been connected and in the process of being tested. VINGN's public computer networks on St. Thomas, St. John, and St. Croix currently offer free use of computers, digital literacy training, and free Wi-Fi to the public so that residents can learn to use the computer and access the internet for job searches, starting a business, for research, for telework, online courses, and the like. I'm pleased to report that our residents are already taking advantage of this access. To date, over 3,000 residents have registered and over 1,800 have completed free training courses for their personal and their professional development. I look forward with great expectations to what our territory will achieve with this technology. Our business development efforts have resulted in annual increases in our Economic Development Commission beneficiaries to a currently approved 83 beneficiaries. These companies are now the greatest source of new job growth, and we have a roster of new applicants. In a close collaboration between the Port Authority, the Economic Development Authority, and St. Croix Renaissance Park, we are evaluating the implementation of a free trade zone to build a transshipment center to handle Eastern Caribbean trade. We have created and successfully utilized tax increment financing, revised the captive insurance laws, and recently submitted legislation to spur economic development in our towns and neighborhoods. To assist small business creation, we were approved by the Small Business Administration for participation in the export grant funding programs, which resulted in trade missions to Canada, Denmark, and Brazil. And our state Small Business Credit Initiative Lending Guarantee Program was approved by the U.S. Treasury. To support access to capital and streamline the process, we are working with this body to combine the Government Development Bank and the Small Business Development Agency to create the Economic Development Bank. This will facilitate closer coordination with our local commercial banks and expand our participation in federal loan and guarantee programs. Essential to this success has been our work in Washington. It took great time and effort to explain and build support in Congress and in the executive branch to reverse decisions at IRS and Treasury that undermined our EDC program. We have found it important to explain the legal foundation for our own partnerships. We continue to press for parity with health programs and to ensure our participation in the President's Universal Pre-K initiative. We have proposed changes in policy to allow our marine industry to grow, and we have fought for our fair share of federal stimulus funding, and we are fighting for a higher share of transportation road funding. And we continue to fight for Virgin Islanders to receive the same access to essential programs as all Americans. Our success in our efforts in Washington has been greatly aided by the partnership we have built with the delegate and her staff. And I'd like to take this moment to thank Delegate Christensen for her steadfast dedication in representing our territory. Our relations with the federal government are much improved. Responsiveness, competence, and the improvements we have made in transparency and financial reporting have built a new relationship of mutual respect. I am pleased that in a few days, the government will issue its fiscal year 2012 audited financial statements, and with the issuance of that report, the government will be up to date with the issuance of its audits for the first time in at least 2 decades. This milestone is so important in our dealings with the federal government and the financial markets and bondholders as well. The improvement in our effectiveness in dealing with the federal government is also evident at the Virgin Islands Housing Authority. And we are looking forward to the end of the years of federal control, and I've appointed and the legislature has approved an advisory board to prepare for the transition to local control. It is also evident in our work at the Bureau of Corrections. The difficulties in running jails and prisons when short-staffed and underfunded are easy to point to. But fairness requires recognizing that despite the continuing issues we are fully aware of, significant progress has been made. The long-running litigation brought in federal court by the ACLU has been settled. The litigation that focused on Groves and Grove has been settled. This averted a federal takeover of our jail and prison, which would have done little to solve the basic problems of our correction system or any correction system. Problems we know how to solve and will solve, though not before increased manpower can be hired, trained, and properly compensated. All this work with our federal partners is an important element of positioning our territory for better days that are sure to come, better days on which we will build a foundation for the continued work as we've struggled with our economic survival. And build we have, and build we will continue to do. We have invested over $200 million in critical infrastructure. We have completed the Christiansted bypass and have begun work on Melvin Evans Highway. We have completed the roundabout on St. John, expanded Cruz Bay parking, invested in the beautification of Frank Powell Park, and commenced work on the Center Line Road. We have developed a new emergency management 911 response system and have built a new emergency management headquarters as part of our complete overhaul of our emergency management and response systems. We have committed to a new transportation infrastructure, secured ferry boats for the St. John, St. Thomas route, and will be issuing a proposal for the St. Croix, St. Thomas route. And we have new buses currently being manufactured. We will soon introduce harbor transportation to the port of Charlotte to relieve traffic congestion. We completed and opened new Charles W. Turnbull Regional Library on St. Thomas, have restarted the renovation of Fort Christian, and are completing Market Square. And we have implemented repairs and improvements to our recreational facilities throughout the territory, including the track facilities at our public high schools, and we are about to complete negotiations on a new Paulie Joseph baseball stadium in the town of Frederiksted. I've indicated to the Virgin Islands Housing Authority that I want to incorporate the site of the abandoned Dishabet housing into our Christiansted town plan, and we are working with the authority on the development of a Sugar Estate senior housing facility to start this summer. And we are continuing to support the work of the Virgin Islands Housing Finance Authority to promote home ownership at its current projects in Whispering Hills on St. Thomas and Bon Esperance on St. Croix. But even with all of this, we need to recognize that our most significant economic development opportunity lies just before us. I'm of course referring to the future reuse of the Hovensa refinery. From the announcement of the closure in January of 2012 to the legislature's approval in November 2013, this one item has consumed me and my team every day for the past 22 and a half months. From dealing with the manner in which the owners shut down the facility with no notice and little regard to the impact on the community, to the practical but essential requirements for ensuring available fuel oil to our utility company and gasoline for our cars, to protecting the salary payments and lump sums due to employees, to convincing the owners to sell the refinery rather than just shutting it down, to working through the process with our community and ultimately to overcoming the opposition of those who were against the sale. In the end, it was through the efforts of many and the passage of legislation by the Senate that we are back on track to getting the refinery reopened and operating, and I want to applaud each and every one of you who supported us to get to this point. Now, we are indeed moving ahead. Hovensa has retained an investment banking firm, and already they are coordinating their work with many parties who have expressed interest in acquiring and restarting the refinery. 2 years is a long time for a refinery to remain closed, and each month that goes by increases the cost of retrofitting and restarting the facility. But the larger economic conditions in the world's oil markets remain favorable to achieve a sale. I expect that we will have a continuing dialogue with the Senate over the course of the sales process, and with hard work and determination, we will be back before the legislature later this year with an agreement to reopen the refinery and bring hundreds of needed jobs back to the island of St. Croix. And although there's presently no heavy industrial activity on the south shore of St. Croix, we have been unrelenting in our efforts to seek redress for damages to our environment from such industrial activities of the past. We now know how better to define obligations with respect to the environment in the future, and such terms will be included in any agreement with the future owner of the refinery. With respect to our efforts to seek redress for environmental damage, we have successfully worked with Cruising Rum to address the effluent and brown stain discharge. And in the 3 legal actions associated with the natural resources damages, we have settled with Alcoa for a cleanup of the site, our negotiations with Lockheed for a settlement, and in mediation with Hovensa. And as requested by this body, we have met with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the U.S. Department of Justice to change the supplemental environmental project approach and use of the $4.8 million to have both the EPA and Hovensa removed from the process of determining how funds are utilized. The high cost of energy in our territory has been a long, a stressful, and a frustrating topic for our residents and local businesses. The issue of energy costs has been a vexing one for my administration and has consumed the hard-earned income of so many individuals and businesses. Yet, there's also an issue where I believe that we have moved from where hoping we will change to where we are now on the verge of the most dramatic change to our energy infrastructure in decades. In retrospect, our long-time agreement with HOVIC and then Hovensa undermined the rational development of our energy mix in the territory. While the discounted price of oil that we enjoyed for decades was a great benefit, it also provided a false comfort that inhibited changes to our energy mix that might otherwise have been made. I think it is fair to say that over the past year, the momentum of WAPA has built, and a new energy future is coming into view. This year, WAPA broke ground on a solar project at Estate Spanish Town that will supply 4 megawatts of renewable energy to the grid on St. Croix, and is working on other solar, biofuel, and wind projects. Water production costs have been lowered through the dedication of 2 state-of-the-art reverse osmosis facilities. WAPA has completed the Anna's Retreat Waterline project on St. Thomas and rehabilitated water catchment on St. John. And most recently, it secured $13 million from the U.S. Department of Agriculture to fund the advanced metering infrastructure and related technologies that will enable both residents and commercial customers to realize the benefits of distributed power generation. And we have contracted with 2 energy service companies that are making energy savings and water conservation investments now at 45 educational facilities and the 2 hospitals, and will deliver guaranteed savings in energy cost. I would agree, and I hope all would agree, that it is WAPA's conversion project from fuel oil to propane that gives real hope to the significant release from high energy cost in the very near future. Last July, WAPA signed a turnkey master agreement with Vitol, a global energy company for infrastructure construction, supply, and delivery of propane at WAPA's power plants. Vitol is financing all of the capital costs associated with the conversion that promises to reduce energy costs by 30% over the near term. I've said many times, all elements of our future ultimately depend on our success in improving our educational system. When we began our work, 3 of our 4 high schools were not accredited. Our students' performance was marked with low test scores at all levels and high dropout rates when they were confronted with the dual challenges of adolescence and academics. Our department consistently failed to properly spend or account for millions of federal dollars, which resulted in the oversight of a federally appointed third-party fiduciary. We have fundamentally changed how we look at education and at our public schools. If there's any one initiative that I believe is the most important change we have brought to the challenges of preparing our children for a better future, is that we are focused on the early years of our children's lives even before they go to school. Hence our priority on and investment in early childhood education and the development of a comprehensive approach to social service delivery. This has been the work of our Children and Families Council, chaired by First Lady Cecile DeYoung, and the rationale for our groundbreaking implementation of a quality rating system for development centers. This is why we started the Parents University, to help our parents do the job only they can do, but do it better and by being better informed. And that is why I started the Governor's Reading Challenge. And this is why these past years, the gifts that Cecile and I are so pleased to route through Santa's hands and into the hands of our children at holiday parties we host on all our islands, have been books. Indeed, books written by local authors, local illustrators, and by local photographers. Stating the importance of learning is not enough, and that is not the issue. The challenge is being sure that we expose each and every child to the joy of learning, to the fun of reading, and the fun of knowing. With a good start, I believe our children will make us proud. And this is our duty, all of us, in big things and in little, a duty that we meet with what we do as public officials, as parents, and as teachers. A duty that, most importantly, we must meet every day in the examples that we set as adults. There is much that we have done, and it has taken a lot of hard work by our education department and in our schools. Our high schools are now all accredited. We have initiated the process of being released from the stigma and the expense of federal oversight. And with the conclusion of a long-standing tax case, I've submitted legislation to direct proceeds from that litigation to increase our support for early childhood education. Yet, we know we don't succeed with every student, despite that being our goal. We have recognized the drawbacks of social promotion in the early years of school, eliminated the practice, and have put in place dropout and learning academies to assist those that just require a little extra push. And we know that there is and always will be more to do in existing schools and where we may need new schools. To this end, we have continued to put in place the pieces to one day have a new school in St. John, and while movement has been frustratingly slow, I am confident that we will achieve this objective. We have targeted the investment of professional dollars to improve the effectiveness of our teachers in the classroom. And we continue to invest in our teachers and our administrators with the expectation that if we improve the delivery of instructions by our teachers and the quality of leadership by our principals and administrators, the outcome will be increasing student achievement and a stronger foundation for our children's learning. We have established standards that we are using to develop professional growth plans, and we'll use surveys, observations, and review of records to evaluate their effectiveness. A pilot program in 10 schools will be completed by the end of this school year, and based on these results, we will make needed refinements for full implementation beginning the next school year. Other education personnel such as coordinators, directors, counselors, and paraprofessionals will be added to the effectiveness and evaluation system. I think that we all know, both from our individual experiences and from all the research into what works in truly preparing children, that the essential ingredient for success is that special connection between the exceptional teachers and their students. And we have two of those special individuals with us here this evening. Both of these individuals are committed to the success of their students, versed in best practices that foster inclusiveness in the classroom, and participate in continuous professional development to improve their ability to provide the best for their students. And so it is my honor tonight and this year, as every year, to recognize our District Teacher of the Year from the St. Croix District, who is also our State Teacher of the Year, Ms. Shabri Providence, and our St. Thomas, St. John District Teacher of the Year, Ms. Diane Tyson. Miss Providence is a fourth grade teacher at Ricardo Richards Elementary School, and Ms. Tyson is a math teacher at Lockhart Elementary School. Ms. Providence, Ms. Tyson, again, please accept our deepest gratitude for your dedication to your craft and your commitment to our children. And let me say once more to each and every student in the Virgin Islands, students fortunate enough to have great teachers like Ms. Providence and Ms. Tyson, and the many other fine teachers that are found in schools across our territory, that helping you become successful students as citizens belonging to our community, as individuals eager and prepared to live full and contributing lives, is a duty that each of us work for every single day. I would also note that we have pressed hard to assure that all of our residents at all ages are not hindered in their efforts and desire to participate in the life of our community. I appointed the first Americans with Disabilities Act coordinator for the government, and with this appointment accepted a responsibility long ignored. 7 years ago, we inherited 30 legal actions against the government, and we have closed all but 4. We have all our departments and agencies conducting self-evaluations and transition plans. We have reinstated the Development Disabilities Council, and in all our government offices, we have individuals in each district who oversee compliance with the ADA. Healthcare has been an inherently difficult problem for our territory, with our own fundamental and systemic challenges, in addition to those other problems facing the nation. While there seem to be many who have been taking pleasure in attacking President Obama's far-reaching efforts to address much-needed reforms to the healthcare insurance market, I, for one, embrace his initiatives and salute his courage. We have worked diligently and in partnership with Lieutenant Governor Francis, as chair of the Healthcare Task Force, and Delegate Christensen, to aggressively maneuver through the obstacle course of the Affordable Care Act. I would like to express my appreciation to Lieutenant Governor Francis for his leadership and to members of the Healthcare Task Force for their work, which resulted in my decision to undertake Medicaid expansion as the best option for the territory under the Affordable Care Act. We have implemented the first changes to the Medicaid state plan in more than 2 decades to broaden the services and access of those eligible. We transferred the Medicaid program from the Department of Health to the Department of Human Services to streamline the eligibility process for our clients and improve access to support services. And we established a nationally recognized partnership with West Virginia's Medicaid Management Information System to reduce costs and improve services to our beneficiary community and to our medical providers. Our healthcare system of 2 hospitals, 2 health centers, 2 federally qualified clinics, a cardiac center, a cancer center, residential care facilities, several non-government health programs, an employee and health insurance plan, ultimately depends on $300 million in annual funding from the central government, and as such must always be an area of critical attention. Our most immediate problem is our hospital system and the financial challenges that our hospitals, most especially the Governor Juan F. Louis Hospital and Medical Center, face in a very difficult economic environment. We have a good and a dedicated staff in the system, and our community is dependent on their good work. What we must address is an organizational structure that results in the duplication of resources and prevents the sharing of knowledge and gaining of efficiencies that could be achieved through system consolidation. I've discussed the challenges and solutions with the leaderships of both hospitals as well as members of the territorial board. And I'm prepared to work with members of this Senate towards the goal of creating a unified organizational structure for our hospitals in time for the next budget submission. Just as important as health of our residents is their safety and security, especially in times of emergency. We have worked hard to ensure that all are well prepared and ready to monitor and respond to any eventuality. We have placed great importance on the coordination of ITEMA with other agencies and local agencies, with our federal partners, and with the private sector. We have recently expanded this level of preparedness to encompass not just hurricanes, but earthquakes and the likelihood of a tsunami, and are developing business continuity plans for our core departments and agencies to ensure the functioning of essential government services in a disaster situation. And this year, we will be hosting the UNESCO Tsunami Conference that will bring scientists and policymakers together to discuss strategies for dealing with the catastrophic events and the need to establish a Caribbean tsunami warning system. But no community is prepared for, and what we must address head-on is the continuing level of violence that has persisted in certain pockets in our community for far too long. We have called on the active support of the community in tackling this problem, and your response has been heartening. With community engagement has come measurable success in our efforts against violence. It is the willingness of the community, either through direct contact with the police or through Crime Stoppers, to report suspicious and dangerous activities that has been the single biggest factor in the significant declines in both murder rates and in burglary rates the past year. We have sustained our staffing levels in the police, even as we're challenged by budget constraints, retirements, resignations, and convictions. And we continue to broaden our recruitment efforts and have fully instituted the Peace Officer Standards and Training Council to achieve a baseline across all law enforcement agencies. We've purchased new equipment, expanded our use of cameras, broadened our use of cutting-edge public safety technology, shipped convicted inmates out of the territory, and invested in training of personnel. And we are seeing our judges be stricter on applying bail conditions and bail amounts. And a major improvement in the past year has been the improved relations with our federal partners and their involvement in community-based programs and the execution of joint initiatives. We are doing all of this while implementing a consent decree resulting from a 2005 use of force finding that requires even more attention to detail and sensitivity to process and procedures. Yet, we continue to be plagued by violence that is driven by turf battles and by retaliation. As fast as we put one perpetrator in jail, another raises his head. This vicious cycle continues to challenge us. It requires that we continue to engage at all levels. Our core commitment remains, if you do wrong, we will arrest you and we will prosecute you. And we will support our judges in doing what they must do under the law. And we will continuously look for new and better ways to reduce this violence. This year, we will implement a strategy of community engagement that is built on a successful model developed by the National Network for Safe Communities. It builds upon the fact that violence in the community tends to be concentrated in very small areas, whether referred to as microplaces or hotspots. It focuses on the reality that the number of people involved in violence is itself small. Once these places and people are identified, law enforcement personnel with community leaders, social workers, religious leaders, elders in our community target and engage with those individuals to combat violent crime, gun, and drug trafficking. This is a strategy that we will engage with the community at all levels, and this model has yielded results in cities across the United States. Notwithstanding all of the hard work that we have done to date, we have not yet completed the journey to financial stability. This year, we project a general fund shortfall of more than $70 million. This deficit must be dealt with. None of the choices and decisions that confront us will be easy to accept or to implement, but choose we must. The need to act is unavoidable. We have made it through the most difficult financial strains, thanks in large part to our rum revenues, the 8% salary rollback, and the increase in the gross receipts tax, the only tax increase that has been imposed so far. While this increase was necessary to support the general fund at a time of extraordinary financial strain, the gross receipts tax is clearly a tax we must reduce or replace with a sales tax or other fairer and more easily collected tax. As our economy continues its recovery, I trust that this is a goal that we can accomplish. Looking into the longer term, we should recognize that we are no different than any other state or municipality in the United States when it comes to the threat of unfunded pension liabilities. Our government employees retirement system is our single largest public asset. It represents the savings of all who have worked and are now working for our government. But it is also the single largest liability of our government. As we've discussed often, current projections by the GERS show that the system will run out of money to make payments to its retirees in less than 10 years. Once its investments are depleted, the retirement obligations will fall on the general fund. Yes, the obligation to pay our retirees will have to compete for the limited dollars in our budget with our demands for health care, public safety, for education, and the salaries of government workers. Today, we are facing the $70 million deficit without having to fund the over $200 million in retirement benefits currently paid by GERS. Just imagine the disaster that would be ours if we had to add this $200 million to the annual budget. This is the future we face if we fail to put GERS on sound financial footing in the short time that we have. When we have begun to take steps to avoid this disaster. I convened a summit meeting with the system stakeholders to assure that we were all fully aware of the scope of the challenge that we faced. We have fully implemented the Tier 2 pensions reforms that have changed the economics of the system for new workers. We unilaterally increased the level of funding from the government, and as of May 2012, by executive order, I created a government pension reform task force and charged it with the task of developing a comprehensive solution. This task force included representatives of the private sector chambers of commerce, the unions, the government agencies most directly responsible for the finances and for the budget, the legislature, advocates for the system's workers and retirees. And last May, I submitted the task force recommendations to the legislature. Now it is time for us to work together to get this done. Yes, these recommended reforms are harsh, but meeting this challenge is the most critical is important for our community. No one who participated in the work of the task force would have agreed to them if there were any other viable choices. Each member understood that some pain would be felt by all. As we work towards balancing our revenues and spending, a further opportunity to do so lies in the hands of the tax collections task force I created. Over the years, we've come to better understand the magnitude of the potential revenues that would flow into the general fund if everyone across our community paid all the taxes that they owe each year. The task force, which is comprised of representatives from the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Internal Revenue, has set upon the task to see that the government collects all that is owed and ultimately with recalibrating our annual revenue expectations. Their initial focus has been on tax years 2008 and prior, and I've instructed them to be fair and equitable, but also to be tough but fair, and they have been. They've increased the filings on property liens and levies on bank accounts, and will soon publish the names of those who refuse to pay what they owe, and we will sue to collect what is owed. The Department of Justice is preparing cases for criminal charges against non-filers who have neglected their filing obligations. It is now clear that our tax collection problem has grown over the years as a result of deliberate underpayment as well as intentional noncompliance. That is to say, there are those across our community, both individuals and businesses, who are choosing not to pay what they owe. And let me tell you that the Bureau of Internal Revenue is well aware of the reports that credit card transactions being processed through St. Martin and Alaska and elsewhere to evade taxes. And this problem has been compounded as others look on and say, if they can get away with it, why can't I? And if they don't have to pay, why should I? Needless to say, this behavior increases the burdens on all of us who do pay what is owed and undermines our ability to raise the monies we need, and indeed we need more money if we are to balance our budget. Now let us look at the $70 million budget hole we must fill and why we can no longer avoid it. If one looks ahead and knows that we will be $70 million short by the end of the fiscal year in September, we know that we cannot spend the amounts set out in the budget approved by the legislature. This means spending must be reduced. Not reduced at the end of the year, but reduced now. All of us are acutely aware of what this means in terms of the operations of government. To spend more now is to run completely out of money sooner. Approximately half of our budget shortfall reflects the decision by the U.S. Department of Interior not to advance cover-over funds to us based on the full $13.25 rate. This was a change from what Interior has done in the past and what we have relied upon in preparing our budgets for many years. The irony of this decision by Interior is that at the time of our greatest need, in the wake of the closing of Hovensa, a closing that has cost the government $100 million in revenues, and when the pressure on our budget was at its greatest, Interior changed their practice. I propose that if we acknowledge and accept the risk that we are taking, we can turn and focus our efforts at this time on how we find a balance of the budget shortfall we know we must find locally, regardless of whether the cover-over extended payments are made. This we can do even as we continue our work in Washington to urge Interior to advance the cover-over funds and for Congress to act as it always has. The balance of our deficit shortfall reflects our need to fund increased personnel costs resulting from the reinstatement of the 8% salary rollback, as well as continuing increases in healthcare costs. We can no longer afford to underwrite healthcare costs with no limit, but until we take such action, as discussed earlier, these ongoing costs will remain a burden of our general fund. If there's no action to address the overall deficit, our cash resources will not be sufficient to meet current spending levels. If we do not immediately find new revenues, we will have no choice but to look once again to drastic cuts in spending, which can only mean one thing: immediate action to reduce personnel cost. Perhaps we can agree to wait and see about the cover-over, but we cannot wait and see about the balance if we are to keep our government operating. We can bicker. We can play the blame game. We can talk about cutting back on things that generate insignificant savings. Or we can do what needs to be done. Last time, you chose to cut salaries 8%. I urged you not to remove that cut, but you did. Perhaps it will be your choice to revisit that decision. Perhaps there are other courses of action that have been discussed before. Or perhaps we will come up with a new idea and a different idea. But like it or not, we know what we have to do. I would like to propose a pathway forward so that we can avoid an acrimonious process that at the end of the day is of no benefit to the community that we serve. We know what in the past we have each proposed and each opposed. Now, however, it's time to come to new agreements. Officials of my administration are in constant and ongoing communication with the Post Auditor and members of the legislature. We've recently been informed that the Senate has tentatively scheduled a hearing on the budget deficit for the middle of February. I commit the full resources of my administration, as always, so that these hearings can be as informative and as positive as possible. What I would like to propose tonight, directly to the Senate President, is that he and I agree to schedule a time when the members of the 30th Legislature and I will meet at Government House within 2 weeks following that hearing, and at that time hammer out an agreement as to how we can reduce our budget deficit by 50%. This will allow our government to operate even as we continue our efforts in Washington to secure the cover over revenues. And if by the time of our next budget submission, Congress has not acted, or Interior continues to decline the release of the funds, we will at that time have to take further action. I believe that at this meeting we will, because we must, find a way forward. I do not believe that it will be easy, but I do believe that it will be done. We will succeed because we must. As always, I face the future with faith and with optimism. I know that a bright future awaits our Virgin Islands, and it is within our grasp. I know that after we have met this immediate crisis, the way forward will be clear. For the path that we have been clearing and the building these past years is not just a pathway through this immediate crisis, it is a course to the future. Yes, we must take some difficult steps now if we're to hold that course. But we know what those steps are, and I am confident that we can take them together and move forward. If the recommendations of the GERS task force are implemented, if Hovensa is restarted, if tax collections are brought to their appropriate levels, we can achieve our goal of financial stability and balanced budgets. GERS will be solvent for years to come. Refinery jobs and revenues will be restored, and we will have the funding available to expand healthcare and Medicaid funding, and we will have the resources to fund education and to build on the progress that we have made. These measures will in turn improve other aspects of our economy. It will take the stress off of the high gross receipts tax that suppresses business development and expansion. It will enable improved funding of public safety and support for tourism. It is a virtuous cycle that will carry us into the future. We will be on the road that we have built, a road to progress and to prosperity. So, let us take these steps together. Let us prove ourselves worthy of the mantle of leadership that the public has given us in trust. This is our time and our opportunity to finally put these years of turmoil behind us. The honor bestowed on me to serve as your governor will by law end at the end of this year. But the work we do together now and throughout the year will cement our future and will be our ring as our legacy for generations. Our work, the work of democracy is never easy, but neither was the long struggle of those who came before us and won for us the freedom and the right to make these decisions for ourselves. We are the proud inheritors of a political freedom that our forefathers and mothers worked and fought so hard to achieve. As we embrace the opportunities that lie ahead, let each of us honor their struggles and demonstrate the same courage on behalf of future generations. Let us act today. Let us act today to build a future for those who come after us. Let us move forward together. Thank you, and God bless our Virgin Islands.